What's that? Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. This Shabbos is the Parsha of Ekev, and this Sikha was given on Shabbos Ekev on the 20th of Av, Chaf Av, in the year 1990 by the Rebbe. So the Rebbe points out that this Chaf Av is the yortzeit of his father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who was the rabbi of a big city called Yenapetrovsk in the Ukraine. Today it's also, I think, one of the largest cities in the Ukraine, maybe next to Kiev, or it might even be bigger than Kiev, I don't know. But in olden days it was also a huge city. And he became the rabbi there when it was under Soviet communist rule, and he suffered a great deal because of it. Eventually he was sent in exile into Siberia in a place called Alma-Ata, and there he died. He died far away in exile. He never saw his son in many, many years, the Rebbe, or any of his sons. And it was a very lonely existence in this place, but as we're going to see, he really made the best of it. And now the Rebbe points out, starts out by saying that a yortzeit, the day of one's passing, it's called yortzeit, involves an ascent to a higher spiritual level. You know, there's a custom that there are a few customs on how to observe a yortzeit. Many Jews fast on a yortzeit because it's a sad time. They remember their loved ones, how their loved one passed away on that day, so they fast during that time. Hasidim and Sfardim celebrate a yortzeit. Sfardim call it Hilula, which means a real celebration. What we do is we bring food to shul, and we make l'chaims, we tell words of Torah, all in memory of the person who passed away. What is the celebration? Are we celebrating someone's death? So such a sad thing. What is the celebration? And the celebration is as we express to people, may the soul of your loved one have an aliyas haneshama, or in Yiddish we say a lichtige Gan Eden, an elevated, a very bright Garden of Eden, because we believe that on a yortzeit, on the anniversary of one's passing, the soul is elevated higher in heaven, and this elevation is a cause for celebration. So therefore, we celebrate a yortzeit. So this particular sikha was said on the 46th anniversary of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's passing. They used to call him Rabbi Leivik as a nickname. They celebrated, it was his 46th anniversary. And the Rebbe points out that the number 46 is equivalent to Levi, which was his first name, the name that he was called, Levi, or Leivik. Also, in this week's Torah portion, it mentions the uniqueness of the tribe of Levi. So it's appropriate, the observance of the yortzeit. As a matter of fact, this year, the yortzeit Chaf Av will be on Monday, this coming Monday. It's one of the major Hasidic days of the year, together with the 19th of Kislev and the 10th of Shvat, which commemorate major events of the Chabad calendar. Chaf Av is also one of the major days. It's a day that the Rebbe used to give public farbrengens, public gatherings, and people used to come in from all over the world to attend these special gatherings, and they were to listen in on live telephone or TV hookups. So the Rebbe points out that the service of Levi, of the tribe of Levi, was alluded to in the verse which our matriarch Leah used to explain why she called him Levi. She said, "This time my man shall be attached to me," because she felt very bad that Yaakov was more and more attached to Rachel. So she was hoping the name Levi is connected to that. This refers to the ultimate marriage bond with my man, meaning to God. This is an allusion to God. And me, meaning the Jewish people. This attachment to God is reflected in the Levite's service to stand before God and to serve Him. In the Beis HaMikdash, we know that the tribe of Levi were the ones who were the Kohanim and the Leviim, the priests and the assistants to the priests in the holy temples, from the time of the Mishkan, from the tabernacle in the desert, all the way to the temples that were built in Jerusalem. the tribe of Levi were the mainstays of that service. And they were the ones that enabled the Jewish people to become closer to God. In those days, they didn't have such big synagogues like they have today, or prayer services, or things like that they have today. The main thing was the service in the temple, and Jewish people used to come at least 3 times a year to celebrate these festivals at the temple. These were the 3 regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. They would also come on other holidays as well. And there, the Levites took the prominent role in the service of the temple. They had helped with the sacrifices, they sang the songs, they helped officiate in every way that was done. They offered prayers and songs and everything. And it was through the Levite service that the Jewish people really came close to God. But the Rambam points out that these qualities are not exclusive to the tribe of Levi. They were not the only ones who helped to bring God's service and God close to the Jewish people. He says not only, as the Rambam points out, not only the tribe of Levi, but each and every person whose generous spirit and intellectual understanding motivate him to separate himself and stand before God and serve him, become sanctified as Holy of Holies. So each and every Jew can serve in the role that the Levites did in bringing people closer to Judaism. He says this implies that every individual has the potential to reach the level of the Levites. Furthermore, the expression Holy of Holies is an allusion to the high priest, the most distinguished individual of the tribe of Levi. Even his spiritual level can be reached by others as well. The Jewish people are called a Mamleches Kohanim, a nation of priests, V'goy Kadosh, and a holy nation. Each one of us, each Jew, is like a priest. We're called a Mamleches Kohanim, a nation of priests. And we are priests unto the nations. We are the ones who serve as the link between the world, Jews and non-Jews and everybody, to God, just as the Levites were in the times of the temple. That is a special job that each and every Jew has today. The Rebbe continues, in particular, the service of the Levites is characterized by 2 qualities, which are actually opposing qualities, if you think about it. On one hand, the Levites were separated from everybody else. They didn't have any land that was given to them. There were certain rules, regulations regarding their service. The Kohen was not allowed to go into a cemetery or marry a divorcee, for example, or a convert. There were many particular laws dealing with the limitations of a Kohen. They were kept apart. There were special cities that were designated for the Levites. These were the Ari Miklat, the cities of refuge. So there was a certain separation between all the rest of the Jews and the tribe of Levi. As the Torah says, at this time God separated the tribe of Levi. But similarly, on the other hand, the Levites were charged with instructing the masses of people in just ways and righteous judgments. As it's written, they shall instruct Yaakov in your judgments and Yisrael in your Torah. The purpose of the Levites was to bring everybody closer to God. So it had these opposite jobs. On one hand, they were separated. On the other hand, their job was to bring out Judaism to everyone. And this was their job. Interestingly, in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, it was a similar situation. Not everybody could go into the Beis Hamikdash, into the temple. You had to be pure. You had to be a Kohen or a Levi to enter into certain places. And the general Jewish population could only go into certain areas. Women could only go into the special designated women's section. That's where the mechitza and the separation of women and men during services come from the synagogues today. There were all kinds of limitations. Who could enter the temple? You needed to be pure. If you were contaminated by a dead body or anything like that, you could not enter the temple. It was a very confining, limited place. On the other hand, we are told that the windows of the temple were built in such a way that the light from the temple would spread out into the entire world. That the holiness of the Beis Hamikdash was to be affected by the entire world. The temple was the center of holiness, but the light, the holiness, would go out far, far away into the entire world. And these two extremes of being separate, but on the other hand, spreading out to everyone, was seen in the Beis Hamikdash, it was seen in the role of the Levium, and it's seen in the job of all the Jews. The Jews are indeed a separate nation, apart from everyone else. But on the other hand, we have a job to spread the light of godliness and values to the entire world, to be an or l'goyim, to be a light unto the nations. So the Jewish person cannot just sit back and stay in their communities or their limited houses, but they have a responsibility of reaching out. In later years, the Rebbe made a campaign of the 7 Noahic laws, the 7 laws of Noah, that were for everybody, not just Jews, but everyone. We know that Jews have an obligation of keeping 613 commandments. Non-Jews have an obligation of keeping 7. And these 7 basic Noahic laws are: don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, belief in one God, not to curse God, work towards justice in the world, kindness to animals, by not tearing a limb from a living animal. And these basic laws are for everybody. They're not just for Jews. So the Rebbe made a campaign in more recent times to teach the non-Jews these campaigns. In fact, in Israel, many Chabad followers carry within their pocket cards, which they give out to Arabs, encouraging the Arabs to keep the 7 laws of Noah. And indeed, this is a campaign that we have to this day, that we do that, to spread the light of godliness and godly values and ethical monotheism to the entire world. And that is an important job of the Jewish people. Now, the interesting thing is, in the temple, they had sacrifices, and the secret of the sacrifices was that it reached the Ein Sof, it reached the level of God's infinite light. From that level, influence is drawn down into the world, elevating all the animal, vegetable, mineral elements of existence as a result of the sacrifices that were done in the temple by a select few. The Rebbe continued saying this fusion of opposites was revealed in Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's life. On one hand, he was a tremendously uplifted person. He was a very holy man. He was a great, great Torah scholar. He had an enormous Torah knowledge, which included both the revealed levels of Torah of the Talmud and the codes of Jewish law, and also the hidden secrets of Torah, Kabbalah and Hasidus, which is called Pnimius Torah, the innermost aspects of Torah. He was a genius. Nevertheless, he served as a rabbi of a very large city and was responsible for spreading Torah and strengthening Jewish practices among the masses. So his job was not just to serve Torah scholars or limited amount of people, but he was right in the center of the city. As we say, he was a tzaddik b'toch ha'ir. He was a righteous person in the midst of a huge city, and his job was to spread it out. In fact, his activities were particularly significant during the difficult time that he lived, when Stalinism was at its peak. We're talking about the 1920s and 1930s, difficult times after the Soviet Communist Revolution, when religion was banned and persecuted. And nevertheless, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, unlike many rabbis of the time that were forced to sign documents that they are not spreading Judaism, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak refused to sign such documents, and he was not coerced into signing these statements for the government, which ran contrary to their own convictions, to his own convictions. Many rabbis did, though, and many rabbis were killed, and they died, and they left Russia, or they agreed to signing these documents and doing things for the communist government that were contrary to halacha. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was not doing that. He continued to carry out his religious functions, his rabbinical functions, openly and proudly. Indeed, due to the vacuum of rabbinical leadership at the time, his activities became extremely important and became important throughout all of the Ukraine and through all of Russia. Not only did he refuse to concede to the Russians, but he even traveled to Moscow and other places to spread Judaism and to encourage the observance of mitzvahs by Jews. A famous story that's always told is when the authorities came to him and they wanted him to relax his observances of the making of Shmor Matzah for Passover, the ran hand-baked matzahs for Passover, to make it less stringent. He refused upon pain of death. He refused to do it. And he was taken to some of the highest levels of the government to force his hand to agree, because if they would relax the rules of baking matzah, they could use any type of flour, and under very relaxed circumstances it would be much, much cheaper. And the authorities said, besides, no one's interested in this anyhow. He nevertheless stuck to his guns, and he was successful in baking matzahs that were according to the strict letter of the law. His activities were carried out, as the Rebbe points out, at a risk to his very life, so that he was exiled, and eventually he died in Alma-Ata in Siberia. He says, while even in exile, he continued his activities. He spread Yiddishkeit, and he continued writing his Torah discourses, even though it was difficult for him to obtain ink. This is a very great time of poverty, and there are many stories about how his wife, Rebbe Zechana, would go out and gather herbs and make her own ink for her husband to use in making these manuscripts, and eventually they were published. After years, they were published, and we have them to this day. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's activities, the Rebbe points out, extended to the lowest levels of existence. So, for example, as rabbi, and afterwards, while in exile, he even worked to spread justice and righteousness among peoples, not just Jews, but even among non-Jews. Everyone came to him, and they respected him for his knowledge, for his kindness, for his fairness. These were all reflected in the service of Levi, extending to the highest levels of spirituality throughout the world at large. Now, these qualities receive greater emphasis today. His Yortzeit, the anniversary of his passing. Although a Yortzeit commemorates the departure of a soul from the body, an ascent from this world, the Zohar teaches that the presence of a tzaddik in all worlds, even this physical world, it felt more powerfully after his death than even in his lifetime. We find that when a tzaddik leaves the world, we feel it more, and his influence is felt more than ever before. We find since the Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away in the early 1990s, there have been more Chabad houses built all over the world than ever in his lifetime. More people are studying his books and following in his ways, seeing the videos of the Rebbe more than ever before. We have, through Jewish educational media and other groups like that, they're sending videos of the Rebbe's talks and his influence all over the world as never before. We are told that tzaddikim ein lahem menucha ba'olam hazeh, v'ein lahem menucha ba'olam haba. They have no rest in this world, and they have no rest in the world to come. They have no rest in the world to come because they're going higher and higher in heaven, and they have no rest in this world because their influence is being felt so greatly in this world, even after their passing and even long after their passing. The Rebbe says it's possible to receive influence from a tzaddik, by a righteous person, by studying his teachings, as implied by the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, who was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's Rebbe, who told Chassidim at the time of his passing. The Rebbe Rashab used to say, "I am going to heaven, but I am leaving my writings with you." This implies that through studying his writings, it's possible to establish a connection with him as he is in heaven. People ask all the time, how can I become close to the Rebbe? How can I be makusher? How can I connect myself to the Rebbe. In fact, even in his lifetime, they would ask that question. And the Rebbe would say, by studying my books, by studying my teachings, you can become closer to me. Similarly, in the world at large, after his passing, a tzaddik affects even the lowest levels of existence. He says, all a tzaddik's deeds, teachings, and service which he carried out throughout his lifetime are revealed and shine from above downward. On the day of a tzaddik's yortzeit, he ascends to an even higher level. But nevertheless, these high peaks are also drawn down into the world. Even though his soul rises higher in heaven, but nevertheless, his influence is found way below, down here in the world, even to the lowest levels of the world. You know, we have in Washington every year, on the Lubavitcher Rebbe's birthday, the senators and congressmen and even the president declares his birthday as Education Day USA. That a special proclamation dealing with the importance of education is sealed in Washington, and Chabad rabbis from all over the country come into Washington, and they talk about the influence that the Rebbe had, together with very, very prominent legislators in government. He says, to those who follow the tzaddik's teachings and to the world at large, as obvious from the text of Kaddish, where it says, may his great name be exalted and hallowed, Yisborach, Yisrael, Yisnaseh, we see that the name of a tzaddik is elevated even higher. The word for blessed also has the connotation be extended, and the Hebrew for forever, the olam vaed, or the olam, can also mean to the world. So the verse can mean, may God's great name be extended into the world. This is part of the Kaddish prayer we say. So, from a deeper perspective, we can understand this from a deeper perspective according to Hasidic philosophy. The soul, before a soul descends into the world, it's described as standing. It's not moving anywhere, because it can't move anywhere. It's confined to a particular level beyond which it cannot advance. Through the descent into a physical body, we talked about this last week, and the service of Torah and the observance of mitzvahs throughout, within the context of our material world, the soul is given the potential, the opportunity to proceed. Thus, all the ascents of the soul in the spiritual worlds are dependent on the soul's service in this realm. So after a person passes away, what causes this elevation of the soul? What makes that happen? And one of the things that makes it happen is the influence that's felt by that person while they were in their physical body down below. Both themselves, all the mitzvahs that they did in this world are to their credit, and God gives it to them to their credit to cause their soul to go higher, and also to those they left behind, their children and their students and other people who felt an influence or had a great influence by them in the low physical world. These all cause the soul to be elevated even higher. So we can imagine the scene, how a soul, before it comes down to earth, is stagnant. It's just sitting there. It's like waiting in line, waiting in line for its turn to come. What is it doing? Not much. It's studying Torah with God, but it's sitting there. It's just waiting. It's waiting. It's not moving. It can't move. Then it's brought down into the physical world. A tremendous descent comes all the way down, and here all of a sudden its work really is cut out for it. Here it has to elevate all of the things in the physical world and raise them up to holiness, to spirituality. And this takes a lifetime to do, through the observance of mitzvahs, through using the material world and all of the things in the material world to be raised up to holiness and to Kedusha. Because the soul's service on this plane is the source for its potential to ascend, that's how it gets up higher, all the peaks to which it ascends have an effect in this world, influencing students who are connected to the soul. So this in turn gives the soul potential for further and higher elevations up above. So by doing a mitzvah down below, we are causing the soul of our parents and our grandparents to be elevated even higher. When we don't do a mitzvah, it can't really happen. It only happens according to their own deeds. But when we do a mitzvah, when we do good deeds in this world, when we put on tefillin, when we keep Shabbos, when we keep kosher, when we observe the holidays, and daven, pray, these things, God sees these things and helps the soul to be raised up higher in heaven. And that's one of the reasons why at a Shiva house we pray. We have prayer services at a Shiva house, because when God looks at the Shiva house and says, oh, take a look at what these people are doing in His honor, God says, then therefore you must have been a righteous man, a righteous woman, and we will raise your soul up higher in heaven. Now the date of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's yahrzeit is significant also. The 20th of Av also provides us with a lesson. The Hebrew word for 20, esrim, is numerically equivalent to the Hebrew word keser, meaning crown. And there are 10 sfiros, 10 divine emanations, 10 divine qualities that God has that we have also. Each of them has a dimension which rises upward and a dimension which transcends below, thus equaling 20. Keser, which is above all those levels, permeates and pervades them all. So Keser is actually not one of the 10 spheros, it is higher than the 10 spheros. The 10 spheros are, of course, Chochmah, Bin, and Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, kindness, severity, and glory, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, and Malchus, which are lower emotional qualities, emotional traits. But Keser is higher even than Chochmah, even higher than the highest level. But through Keser, all of the other levels down below are affected and are permeated through the power and the holiness of Keser. This concept, the Rebbe says, is reflected in our service. Keser is connected with royalty. Why? Because there are 10 spheros, there are 4 worlds. Keser is the highest of the spheros, but it is connected to the lowest of the higher sphero, which is Malchus, kingship. So Keser of one sphera is Malchus, kingship of the higher sphera above it. So therefore Keser is connected with royalty, for a crown is the symbol of kingship. When describing the effect of the Jews' declaration of Na'aseh and Nishma, we will do and we will listen, as the Jews proclaimed at Mount Sinai. The Midrash relates the following parable, which sheds light on this relationship between a king and the crown. The subjects made 3 crowns for the king. One he put on his own head. One he placed on the head. Of his subjects. This implies that 3 crowns are the same level. They're at the same level, but it all depends on how they were used. He says, let's see, made 3 crowns. Oh, okay, so the subjects made 3 crowns for the king. 1 he kept on his own head, and 2 he placed on the head of the subject. So the king, God, made 1 crown for him and 2 crowns for everybody else. So this implies that the 3 crowns are on the same level, and thus the crowns are given to subjects, they're connected to the crown worn by the king. So the relationship we have to God, who is the king, is the relationship that we have down below as well to ourselves and to God. Furthermore, even the crown worn by the king was given to him by who? By the subjects. We gave it. As it says, we crown God as our king. Tamlichuni aleichem. God, we made God our king. It's something that we talk about during the month of Elul and of Tishrei coming up. That it is we who coronated God. We made God a king, as they say, as an expression. Ein melech b'li am. There is no king without a people. Without a people, you have no king. You know, when when the Shah of Iran abdicated and came to, I think, the United States, he was no longer the Shah because his people did not accept him anymore as the Shah. This concept is reflected in the verse, a king is subjugated to the field. Although the people in the field are on a lower level than those living in the king's palace, in his capital, but their service in the field, the common folk, the peasants, the plain workers, they're the ones that make the king the king. They fulfill God's intent and desire for a dwelling in the lower worlds. So the king needs the common folk. He needs you and me. He needs us in order for him to be king. The service of refining the lower levels shares an intrinsic connection to the 20th day of Av. The month of Av is connected with the transformation of the lowest levels up to holiness. As the Midrash states, a lion, namely Nebuchadnezzar, arose in the month whose sign is a lion, which is Av, and destroyed the lion of God, which is the base of Mikdash, which is also called the lion, in order that a lion, namely God, should come in the month whose sign is a lion, this month, of, and build the lion of God, this is Mikdash. So the revelation of the lion of holiness, which is a reference to the level of Keser, comes through the transformation of the forces which destroyed the holy temple. So we observed the destruction of the temple on the 9th of Av, just this last week, a few days ago, and it's the saddest day of the year, indeed. But because of Tisha B'Av, because of the forces that destroyed the temple, we come about to refine those sources, to rejuvenate those forces. And that begins on Shabbos Nachum, the last Shabbos, where it was the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av, and receives more intensity from Shabbos to Shabbos, with God promising the Jews, yes, I will console you. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, I will console you. And therefore, the after Tisha B'Av, especially after Shabbos Nachamu, is a very, very happy time. Many very happy, important things happen. For example, on the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av, as the Talmud says, someone who did not see the joy of Tu B'Av has never seen joy in his life, just like someone who saw the water drawing, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, during the intermediate days of Sukkot, never knew what joy was like in his life. So he compares the joy of Tu B'Av, 15th of Av, to the joy of the holiday of Sukkot. It was such a major day. Many, many things happened during that day. The Jewish people stopped dying in the desert, and they were given permission to enter the land of Israel. And it was a tremendously happy day. Moshe went up to Mount Sinai the second time. And something very auspicious took place during that time, and that was that since it was a very happy time, shidduchim were made. Many matches between boys and girls, Jewish boys and girls, were made during that time as well. So there's a connection to that and to the coming year. From the 15th of Av, it's customary to wish a person to be inscribed for a good and sweet year, and more particularly for the 20th of Av onward. We begin the preparation for the month of Elul and for the coming high holidays. The month of Teshuvah and mercy, when God goes out into the field, it says Hamelach Masada, the king is in the field, that a whole year the king, God, is like our flesh and blood king, is limited to his palace, and you need to go there and you need to make special arrangements to meet with the king. But during one time during the year, the king would go out into the field and meet with his subjects, and they could ask him whatever they wanted. And that is the nature of the month of Elul, where the king goes out into the field. And we are preparing for that right now. All the synagogues and everybody are preparing. What are we doing for the holidays? Or where are we going to be davening? Are we going to have services? Are we not going to have services? What's going to be? But even under normal circumstances, people are starting to make arrangements and getting ready for the high holidays and the month of Elul, which is only 2 weeks away. The 15th of Av is also very significant in that it is a full moon, which is a very auspicious time as well. And this is connected with the end of this week's Torah portion, which says, every place on earth, every place on which your feet will tread will become yours. And I was talking about the land of Israel. When the Jews come into the land of Israel, they come into the land of Israel and they will take possession of Eretz Israel. It says your boundaries will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the river, the Euphrates River, until the final sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea. So at the end of this week's Parsha, we have a blessing that the land of Israel will be extended. The borders will be much larger. There's questions about exactly what were the borders of Israel. But according to the Torah, generally speaking, we say that on the north it was about half of what Lebanon is today. On the south, it was pretty much Egypt. On the east was parts of Saudi Arabia, parts of Jordan, which is way into the eastern portion of beyond the Jordan River, and towards the northeast parts of Syria. So the land of Israel in biblical times and in future times will probably be much larger than it is today, even larger than any peace deal that they're talking about is talking about. So this is in the Parsha this week. Take a look at the Parsha this week and you'll see it yourself, how large the land of Israel is. Indeed, from the Euphrates River, which is in Iraq even, in the country of Iraq, that will be one of the eastern borders of the land of Israel. The Rebbe says the Euphrates River, by the way, in the Yom Kippur War, I believe it was the Yom Kippur War, the Israeli army was within, I think, 25 kilometers, 25 miles from Damascus. Damascus, the capital of Syria. They were ready to march on Damascus, and there was nothing holding them back. And the Rebbe urged them very strongly, go into Damascus, because if they were to take Damascus, you can only imagine what would have happened. They would have completely demilitarized that country. Completely demilitarized. There would be no Syrian refugee crisis today. There would be no dictatorship or persecution of people in Syria. It would have been completely demilitarized, completely humbled and lowered if that would have happened. But unfortunately, the authorities during the time, especially in America, the American authorities, put pressure on Israel to stop and not to go forward. Probably one of the biggest mistakes that Israel ever made. Anyhow, so we see here that in his commentary on the last verse, Rashi points out that the Euphrates is actually not a large river and is referred to as great because it's next to Eretz Israel. It's actually part of Israel. As Rashi concludes, quoting a parable offered by our sages, it says, if you come close to a person anointed with oil, namely Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, the chosen land, oil will be attached to you. The importance is also attached to the Euphrates. So the significance of this latter statement can be understood in terms of our sages' statement, which our sages write, all the mitzvahs of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, performed before you were nothing, vaporous in nature. They did not affect the material substance of the world. But, in other words, after the mitzvah was done to your tefillin, they wore tefillin, but after you davened with the tefillin had no more holiness to them. Holiness, spirituality did not attach itself to anything physical. But in regard to us, today, after the Torah was given, your name is like oil poured forth, like one who pours from one vessel to another. The mitzvahs we perform have actual substance to them. So when tefillin are made and when they are used, for example, the holiness remains in them, always. So you can never throw a pair of tefillin away. They have to be dealt with respectfully because they are a vessel for holiness. And so it is by everything that we use for holiness. Whatever it may be, a book that has God's name in it, or anything else. There's a law that if you build a synagogue, you cannot sell the synagogue to make it into a church. You're not allowed to do that. If you have a Aron Kodesh and you want to remove the Aron Kodesh and build a nicer one, you can't just throw it away and use it for firewood. You need to dispose of it in a respectful way, preferably to give it to another synagogue that they should use the Aron Kodesh. You cannot destroy an Aron Kodesh because it held the Sefer Torah in it. So these things are holy things, even though they are not Torah, they're a piece of wood, but holy things were done to them. I remember when we lived in the college area. We lived in the college area, and we had a wonderful house that we bought in the college area, and we received that house miraculously at a very low price. It was an amazing thing. And for 8 years, we entertained students there. We taught Torah there. We had Shabbos there. We celebrated holidays there. We did a tremendous amount of outreach there, reaching out to young people, especially college students at San Diego State, in that house. That house had enormous holiness to it. There were children who were raised in that house, namely my children. There were mezuzahs on each and every door of that house. Prayers were said in that house. So when it came time for us to move, and to move to University City to take up the position here, we needed to sell the house. So we listed the house, but we found out that if you list it, you can't discriminate who's going to buy it. You have to take whoever is going to come and buy the house. So we were a little nervous about that. Who's going to take this holy house? This house, like for us, was like the base of Mikdash. So we waited, and the first offer we had in the house, the first people that were interested were a group of seminary students from the church across the street on College Avenue. They said, oh, way, our house is going to be used by a bunch of ministers, and they're going to observe their Christian rites in this house. I can't feel it. It's a Jewish house. It was used as a Jewish house for so many years. I don't feel comfortable having it being used by another religion. I'm just not comfortable with that. Luckily, they withdrew. And instead, a Jewish doctor purchased the house, and we felt much better about that. And then after that, a few years later, an Orthodox family that bought the house, which still live there to this day. People who are active in the Jewish community and in Beth Jacob, and we're very happy about that. Because it was a holy house. Holy things were done in that house. So, the Rebbe continues. He used the example that oil, as we said before, our sages said, your name is like oil poured forth. So we know that when oil is poured on something, it permeates every part, every aspect of that vessel, whatever it is. Oil is connected with the essence, and yet is drawn down into the lowest levels. Comes all the way, goes down. Similarly, after the giving of the Torah, holiness can be drawn down into the material substance with which mitzvahs are fulfilled. And we know that oil is a very important substance in Jewish life. Shabbos candles are very often lit with oil. Hanukkah candles also we use olive oil. Yortzeit candles in many countries, they use oil. Oil was used to anoint the high priests and the Kohanim in the observance of their service to God, and we believe that Mashiach himself will be anointed with oil. In fact, the word Mashiach comes from the word anointed, to anoint with oil. He says this concept is also related to the Euphrates River, which the Torah describes as the fourth of the rivers emanating from Eden. This implies an association with the lowest levels. Thus, our sages associate this river with the fourth exile, which we are presently enduring through oil the revelation of his essence, which permeates through all things. Even this low level can be elevated. And oil has two qualities to it. On one hand, oil does not mix with anything, nothing at all. On the other hand, everything has oil in it, everything. It amazes me sometimes where they find some oils that they have. It's incredible. But oil is found in everything. It's a basic component of life. Similar to the Jewish people. The Jewish people don't mix. We keep our separate identity. We don't intermarry. We're not supposed to. We maintain our separate religion, our separate customs and halachas, laws. On the other hand, we are found everywhere. Jewish people are everywhere in every aspect of life. Also, it's interesting that in Hasidic philosophy it's explained that the utterance in Bereshis, in the beginning of Bereshis, is in general includes all 9 statements which brought about the creation of all the particular elements of the world. So in Bereshis is a hint of everything that comes afterwards, takes place. It says Vahi Or. In fact, the word for secret, Raz, has the same numerical value as Or, which is light. So through studying the secrets of Torah and involving ourselves in the deepest levels of Torah knowledge, we will come to a great light which will come to the world as a result of that. There is let's see here. Anyhow, this Shabbos, as we say, follows the 15th of Av. The 15th of Av, which, as mentioned above, is connected with the increase in Torah study. Preferably, this increase should be expressed in communal study. At least 3 people or so should get together, make farbrengens during this time, gatherings. And it's worthy to mention the importance of the education of the young during this time. The increase in Torah study leads to a time when new Torah will emerge from me, the Torah of Mashiach, when then we will truly merit to have an extended life, which is the resurrection of the dead. As it says, those who lie in the dust will arise and sing, with Rabbi Levi Yitzchak as their head, as we say, the Rebbe would say, for today, the spiritual source of his soul shines powerfully. May this take place immediately in this year, a year of miracles, which it's actually in 1990 in Hebrew was Tafshin Nun, which was from the initials Tiyeh Shnas Nisim. It should be a year of miracles, which will lead to will show wonders and miracles during this time. It's interesting also during the second half of Adar, the second half of Av. It's a very happy time. We have gone through a very sad time of the 9th of Av, 9 days before Tisha B'Av, 3 weeks, which really ruined our summer to a certain degree. And we fasted on the 9th of Av, and but nevertheless, after that, soon after that, a few days later, 6 days later, we have one of the most joyous days of the year, a very happy day, the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av. We are told that the boys and girls would go out in the field. The girls would go out, they would dress in something borrowed, maybe the expression that, something for the bride should wear something borrowed, something new, something white, something blue, something like that. It came from this, that each of the girls would come out into the fields. And the Talmud tells us in kindness that they would say to the boys, don't look at beauty. Sheker hachein v'hevel hayofi. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is false. Look at a family. Look at goodness. Sheker hachein v'hevel hayofi. Isha yiras Hashem yisalal. A woman indeed that fears God, she should be praised. In other words, the girls would say to the boys, don't look at the exterior, look at the interior. Look what's inside of the person. See the goodness inside of a person. Indeed, that's an important lesson for all of us when we are making shidduchim for our children or for ourselves. That we should not think that just the outside, the beauty, the good looks of a person, the shapely form of a person are the important thing. Not at all. The important thing really is what's inside of the person. What kind of person is a person kind? The first question I always ask when I'm looking to make shidduchim for my children or for other people is, I want to know, is that person kind? Are they a good person? Do they do good things? And we see here by Rachel that when Yaakov went out to find a shidduch for himself, he went out and he saw the kindness of Rachel, the goodness of Rachel. Yitzchak servant Eliezer or Avram's servant Eliezer went out to find a shidduch for Yitzchak, and he wanted to see, is this Rivka, is she feeding the camels, feeding the animals also before me, in addition to me? It says she gave water to the camels as well. It shows a level of kindness that our matriarchs and our patriarchs were very kind people. They were very good people. They helped other people. Abraham used to feed even non-Jewish wayfarers, Arabs who were traveling through the desert, who were hot and who were thirsty and hungry, and he would feed them and he would help them. And how important that is, that we need to do that. Not just for Jews, but to Gentiles as well. This is a quality of the Jewish people that you can tell a Jew by one of the levels is his level of kindness. Is he a kind person? Does he have rachmanis on others? A few days ago, I got a call from a woman who, during these difficult times of the virus, we're finding people don't have food to eat. They're going homeless. They lost their jobs. They have no money. Even with the limited stimulus packages that the government is giving, people are still having an extremely tough time of it. So I got a call from a woman. She called me from a state of desperation. She has no food. She has no place to live. Can we possibly give her a donation? And we talked for a while. Turns out she was not Jewish. In fact, she was African American. And I said to her, have you gone to some of the churches near where you live? And she said, yes, but they're not giving. Nobody's giving. No one is able to help me out. So I said to her, I will be able to help you out. I'll help you out. We'll give you a donation. And indeed I did. She came to me and I gave her a donation which would help her for at least a couple of days, maybe a few days, and at least get her some respite from her very, very difficult situation that she was in there. Kindness is an important quality for all of us. So some people said, Rabbi, why are you giving to her? She's not Jewish. What does she do for us? What are you getting from that? It has nothing to do with it. You see a person in need, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, you go out and help them. You reach out to them and make sure that they also have food to eat. Make sure that they are okay. In Chabad, our policy is that anybody who comes to us, anybody, is given a donation, either some food or a little bit of money, maybe not a lot, if you don't have a lot, but everybody is given something. This is the quality that Abraham instilled in all of us, to help other people, to help our fellow men, no matter who they are. And that's something that we all need to keep that in mind. Those of us who are more fortunate, those of us who have some money or some savings or have a job, to help out to those who don't. Certainly we have to be careful, guard our lives and our health in doing that, of course, but nevertheless, Rahmanis, having pity, caring for another person, should be on the top of the list. That is a quality that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak taught his sons, his three sons, and these are the qualities that we saw in the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was so concerned to help others by starting drug programs, not just for Jews, but for everybody, by starting social service organizations, to help other people, to be there when other people need help. And he started our Chabad houses for that purpose as well. So I'd like to wish you all a good Shabbos coming up, and let us all reach out to others who need the help and help them out. Shalom, and we'll see you next week. Okay?